We're now starting the question, and we will start with questions to the Commissioner. Michael.
Yes, I have a question which follows directly to your elaborations, Commissioner. So the European Cancer Plan and particularly the mission on cancer are, I think, crucial for addressing many kinds of inequalities, as you had pointed out. And we are enormously thankful that the Commission and the Parliament have set this ambition and also all the hard work to make the mission a reality. At the same time, the community of cancer researchers and cancer practitioners feels that the mission is very complex to understand and very difficult to approach. That's a perception, and I take it from your talk that you also heard that, because you made also one critical remark to that. So my question is, how can the European Academy of Cancer Sciences support the Commission to make the mission less complex and to have the best brains integrating into the mission and having the best outcome for European citizens?
Thank you very much for this question. I agree that it's not an easy instrument, because let's not forget that our missions, because there is 5 and one of them is the mission on cancer, that was one of the main novelties on the Horizon Europe program. What we would like to propose this time is not to invest in one technology in one domain, but to see how we can achieve ambitions by combining different instruments, different initiatives, different fundings, and that's why it's so much complicated. Now, what I would like to see is that we are able to advance with very concrete, achievable deliverables. I think that that will be the first solid base, because we started in 21, really. In 23, we have now to deliver on the platform, on the hubs, on how to make this access much more equitable. At the same time, in parallel, we just start an assessment process, and we would like to review what is working well and what is not working well. So what I would like to ask here is first to stay in regular dialogue and to tell us what is working well, and when there is a need, even simply sometime not to continue to insist. And on the other side, I would like to recommend to work very closely with the board of the mission, because in the beginning, the board formulated 13 recommendations for the entire mission. What I would like to see, and I just met the board this week, is that for the next phase, there will be 3 main recommendations, but that will make a difference. So I think that that will be our base to see how we can simplify, how we can facilitate, because after all, you mentioned the European Parliament, and the European Parliament was very clear. That's not the same life cycle like Horizon Europe program. We have 4 years to show results, and if there is no results, the funding for missions from the second pillar of Horizon Europe program will be reviewed. And I like very much this idea to have this level of success stories. So yeah, I would like really to invite you to work very closely with the board. They will have a particularly important role to play, because they know exactly what happened on the ground. They are following very closely what's happened, and they are quite critical too, I must say. For me, it's something positive. And on the other side, to share as soon as possible the data that we'll receive with the assessment process in order to identify those tools and instruments that will make a difference, and then that will be useful for you, because after all, the mission is not here for the European Commission. This mission is here for the benefit of all.
Thanks very much. Another question? Well, I have another one. How can we best coordinate efforts in a pan-European manner? Research is a competence of the Union, but health, no. How can we get better alignment of priorities and policies between the EU and the member states? How can, let's say, also the community, the research community, help by providing evidence-based advice to inform policy?
very complex question because indeed we've very well known what are our competencies in research and what are the competencies of our member states, especially in this domain of health. And they are keeping very jealously their competencies, I must say. But it's true that first we need to continue to work closely with them and to have this monitoring, what is already implemented, what is not. And from my side, I think that we have to use research and innovation as a motivation for our member states to implement reforms, to modernize, to ensure access. And that's why I'm seeing Horizon Europe program as this catalyst for these changes. Very, very concrete examples. We have our strategic planning for 25-27. Of course, that here we have to integrate what was not done with our member states via the missions, what we have to improve with the partnerships, how to closely link these research and innovation instruments and tools that we have in our disposal. But I think that it's something completely new that we have, and that's why I count so much on the mission, because I can't intervene in the competencies of our member states, and I must say that here the task of Commissioner Stella Kyriakides is much more difficult. But on the other side, we can see how we, with the mission on cancer, we can address some of the weaknesses. It's true that via this European network of national hubs, we can address the issues of timetables, diversity that was raised very, very clearly. Let's start by this. The second, we can address the cross-border cooperation, because here I must say that we need to advance much more on the health data space. It was good that we sent the signal to our member states, but I remember when I was Commissioner for Digital Economy and Society, how difficult it was simply to have the data in one single format, because even within one country, we have different formats. It's absolutely difficult. So again, for me, regular dialogue, monitoring, clear data, and not to oblige member states to do something, but encourage them, create incentives, and I think that the best incentive is research and innovation.
Michael Boutrous. Yeah.
I also have a question for Commissioner Gabriel. By establishing the ERC, a lot of things changed in fundamental research for the better in Europe. And the ERC has really now a tremendous reputation and is really envied worldwide. And you also mentioned the European Innovation Council that then basically brings ideas really to the market and into the economy. But somehow there's something missing in between, an instrument for translational cancer research and also prevention research for international European networks for early investigator-initiated trials. And this might become a real bottleneck of transferring basic research into applications for the benefit of patients, but also to support and strengthen the economy. Should it be maybe an aim of the mission to really establish such a, let's say, sustainable instrument to really fund such research in the longer term?
Well, I will not use first the mission on cancer for that, because I think with the mission, we have to achieve those 4 main priorities in order to convince our member states and our citizens that it's useful. But we have our internal synergy to realize in order to strengthen the cooperation between the European Research Council and the European Innovation Council. And that was my starting point. One year ago, I asked for a common meeting. That was not obvious to organize this meeting, but suddenly when a meeting was supposed to be for 1 hour, there was more than 6 hours. They started to discuss together. This year, we are starting with something very concrete, new intern scheme. We would like to have exchanges between researchers and companies that are funded by EIC and companies funded by EIC to use the data and the basic and the fundamental research that we have with the European Research Council. I'm sure that that will be only the beginning. So for me, that's now the objective. Let's try to continue to invest strongly in fundamental research. With the new innovation agenda, let's affirm the leading role of the Innovation Council, but ensure constantly that they are working together. After, we can arrive to the mission and the partnerships, because let's not forget them. We have a cluster on health with a quite big budget. I think that first we have to start with very small, flexible schemes to show that that can work. And after, of course, I think that that will be obvious that the next step is to see how via missions and partnerships we can address this.
Could we wait a little bit because the time is running? So what I would suggest we move to Elisabete questions, and then if there are time at the end, we can come back again. So question for Elisabeth. Kevin.
Aji, it was raised there. Yeah.
Much, and there was one statistic in there that really caught my eye, that when you look geographically around the globe at the incidence and the deaths from cancer, they were roughly comparable in different regions, right? The percentage roughly matched. However, in North America, the number of deaths was significantly fewer than the cases. And I wonder if you could speak to what that might represent in terms of a greater diagnosis of cancers in older people that may not necessarily lead to their death, versus a more effective implementation of treatment and care in North America compared with other regions.
I think this is indeed the case, and Professor LOWY can speak more about the North America situation. And in other regions, and in particularly in Asia and Africa, you see actually the opposite, which was the main focus of the talk, was actually to show that the disparities are immense, because you have relatively lower incidence and higher mortality, and this is also reflected, of course, in survival. And the differences are not only between continents, countries, but within countries itself and regions by socioeconomic states. So the overall truth across the globe, in America, in Europe, and elsewhere, is that socioeconomic status is what really determines a very big chunk of incidence, mortality, and survival all over. In Europe, and I have the honor to be in the board of the Cancer Mission since its inception, this is what we discuss almost in every one of our meetings. How can we tackle inequalities in Europe? And it's, I think it's time, maybe one of the 3 questions that we will need to address. If you want to reduce from the 13 priorities to 3, is inequalities. I think this is a major challenge in the future. I believe that's indeed the case, and maybe Professor LOWY can comment further.
Answer. To some degree, it's because of, if you will, good treatment. To some degree, it probably is overdiagnosis, where because of the extensive screening that we do, there may be people who are diagnosed with cancer who might die with their cancer rather than from it.
That was exactly my thought. Many thanks.
The questions? Yes.
Thank you. Actually, my comment or question relates both to you, Dr. WEIDERPASS, and Commissioner Gabriel. About 500 million households in the world use traditional cooking. They cook with charcoal, fuel wood, straw, cow dung, etc. And the women mostly doing the cooking are forced smokers of indoor smoke. The figures quoted for Ethiopia alone are 70,000 cancer deaths from lung cancer among women because of that. To what extent does your data capture that? And to what extent do we need to connect different missions with each other, Commissioner. The cancer mission with the energy transformation and development agendas. So I wonder how far, Ulrich, the continuum needs to stretch backwards to the causation. Calling it lifestyle questions is not, in my opinion, capturing the granularity properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. We have the lucky to have an expert in environmental air pollution, Dr. SCHÜZ, and with Julio's permission, if so, Dr. SCHÜZ can answer on indoor air pollution, please.
Yes, thank you. There's actually not much to say other than confirm what you are saying. So it's really a problem in low-income countries. We can confirm it. It explains many of the smoke-related cancers that we see in women in low-income countries are due to the indoor cooking and indoor heating. And we know by providing other means, we can substantially reduce this impact. And there's still some differences. I mean, we've seen it ourselves. The smoke is so dense that actually I have to run out of the hut after 1 minute because I have tears in my eyes. So it's also unbelievable how much apparently get used to it. But in principle, we know the prevention, we know the immense cancer burden, specifically also in China, lung cancer in women, but also in most African countries. It's clearly a preventive measure with which we have to move forward. So, very good point.
Just to tag on to this question, then could one also now think then about cultural practices in certain places like cervical cancer and all of that, early marriages or stuff like that, that could also impact on the figures that you presented, like in Ghana or some other places. Certain cultural practices could also play a role.
So if I can just quickly add on this is actually why we say we have, it's an under-researched area. The practice is, you know, a lot of the research on causes of cancer is actually happening in Europe, North America, and other high-income countries, which means that the other cultural practices are totally ignored. And especially from the agency, we do have these programs where we go to the countries. The research is challenging, but looking at many of these aspects, and the indoor cooking is only one of them. There's also, we identify there may be thermal injury that comes from the habits of drinking very hot beverages, much hotter than we drink it in Europe. We have, for instance, the geophagia that is also exclusively in some of the low-income countries. So it's absolutely an under-researched field where we have to put much more research efforts into clarifying what the real cancer burden is related to these cultural habits.
Right.
Thank you very much, Julio. I have two brief questions, one certainly for Maria Gabriel and for Douglas Lowy. ULRIK make a lot of emphasis on the need for comprehensive cancer centers, which we know is a complex institutional context. And in Europe, we are certainly very proud of the European Research Council, essentially for basic research. So how far do you see that we can develop further research careers which will promote translational research, particularly for this area and for the promotion of comprehensive cancer centers? My second question is for Elisabeth, and essentially based on what we have heard and the increasing disparities between North and the Global South, how far do you see development funds, either Global Europe programming or the US aid or national international development funds promoting cancer research in the Global South? Thank you.
In terms of the question of collaboration and cooperation, this could be formal or informal, and it also, I think, depends on the degree to which it is research that is more basically oriented or preclinical versus clinical. In many ways, paradoxically, it is easier to collaborate on preclinical research than on clinical research because of many legal and regulatory hurdles between different countries, and the degree to which it might be possible to break down those barriers in the interest of health, I think would be highly laudatory. Dr. Alberto Costa, I've had the opportunity of talking with him on more than one occasion about this, and Commissioner Gabriel as well. So I think that's one area. If at the risk of belaboring things, let me say that the National Cancer Institute and Cancer Research UK last year collaborated with joint funding for research on their grand challenges. The reviews were done by Cancer Research UK, but we put our funding together. So that's another model.
Thank you very much, Manuel Leitor, for your questions. Regarding the research disparities, I mean, as you probably know, the World Health Organization has currently 3 cancer priorities in the agenda: breast cancer, cervical cancer, and pediatric cancer. And the International Agency for Research on Cancer of IARC of WHO, we are the research branch of WHO. And we have created a research agenda across these 3 priorities, meaning that when we go to countries, we try to implement the WHO agenda on these 3 cancer types, we come with a research agenda and we try to develop that across the world. Of course, that's very ambitious and we are doing baby steps, but that's what we aim. And globally, we also have our strategic research at IARC, which is global, and we try to incorporate countries in it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ulrich, you want to say something? No? No?
I'd like to react very briefly on the question of Manuel HEITOR on research careers. I think that here there is 2 aspects definitely to keep in mind. On one side, we have excellent researchers, but we have to continue to support them. And we need to attract much more young people to research career. But that means that we have to address 2 very, very difficult questions. We have to review the research assessment system, because you know that in Europe it's only based on the publication. Example, it's absolutely unexplored, this field of research with cultural practices, because as I mentioned during my intervention 3 months ago, for the first time, together with the European Parliament, we raised this issue of the role of culture for health and well-being. And we discovered that there is no European data. There is excellent research, articles and publications, but everything is fragmented. But if you'd like to have people working in this field, we need to valorize these experiences and not only to count the publications. And we need to ensure better conditions for those researchers. So I think that that's for me a very, very strong demand, that we need to address the issues of the career of the researchers to ensure better conditions, to address the precarity of their contracts. And in that way, we can create more incentives for them to create networks, to participate and to expand the research field by creating synergies with different domains.
Alberto Costa?
I'm very happy to bring the best wishes to this conference on behalf of Commissioner Stella Kyriakidis, that unfortunately had other commitments, and she apologized for not being here. She will follow all the proceedings. And I think I see some in the room who were there at the previous European Cancer Plan. Ulrich, you remember, it was called Europe Against Cancer. And we at least managed to convince to put on the cigarette package smoke kills. So we bought that, and IARC made the calculation. I think the first plan had an impact. I also remember I think we can count the impact on skin cancer with all the campaign we have done for sun exposure within Europe. So it's very interesting to see that a year later, Europe has been capable to develop a second plan. And the two things that probably are most different and important than the previous plan is that A, there is research this time. The link with mission makes a huge difference. The first plan was only in communication. It was very important. You remember the Decalogue, the 12 points against cancer, do mammography, but this has the great injection of research. And the second is, as Dr. Lowy said, the fact that we realized that we were risking to duplicate and to overlap with what the Americans were doing. So the fact that we are talking to each other and the fact that we are making the effort to compare the two largest plans in the world, it's a sign also of respect for taxpayers that we're paying twice for the same things if we're not careful. So we really thank you for taking the initiative, Cardinal TURKSON and the Pontifical Academy, because you deserve the credit of flagging the importance of inequalities. We have a program on inequalities, but clearly you being Catholic, so global, you are just flagging the fact that Europe and US is not enough. To fight cancer, we have to remember the rest of the world, and I think that's what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks very much. A question for Dr. Douglas Lowy? No? Yes? Ulrich, yes.
I can come back with an additional comment since we talk about collaboration. And I can see that collaborations, as you say, in prevention research is in some way more easier, less controversial. And I appreciate very much the comment from Joachim here also. Reverse translational research is important in all areas. You have to go backwards and see the background. Coming now back into, we say that clinical research, therapeutic research is more difficult. For sure it is. And I would like to remind us again, I've done it many, many times when we met the Commissioner Philippe Busquin many years ago. He said, the main problem we have is when we have a question and we approach different cancer organizations, if we go to 5 or to 10 organizations, we get 5 or 10 different responses back. So please help us to unify. And that process started actually and has moved fairly well forward. And I'm happy also to see that the European Academy of Cancer Sciences, first with Lex Hegemont, then with Anton Burns, now with Michael BAUMANN, the presidents have been very supportive to bring in different organizations so we will be able to speak with one voice. Well, talking now about the hubs, because from a theoretical point of view, it looks very well. But to have functional hubs will not be an easy thing, because the first thing, if we would like to move further, is that we not only share data, we need to share visions and strategies. And we are the cancer community. We need to go together and share visions and strategies regarding the clinical cancer research. So I come back to Michael Baumann's question. He asked you, Maria Gabriel, how can EACS be helpful here? And I think this is an organization that has shown that we can bring in people together, speak with one voice. And I think it could be a possibility if we outline better how could we collaborate so we reach also the different actors in the different countries. Because if you don't bring in the key researchers in these single countries, you can have as many hubs, but it will not function. And I just say briefly an example. We will hear about it from Hungary. Budapest and Peter Nance brought in invited the Academy to be supportive in thinking how to unify. And that resulted in the Central Eastern European Academy of Oncology, which is now expanded. And I think the very, very important thing is to have the comprehensive cancer center, because the centers are not speaking for the researchers' own activity, but for a total comprehensive view of what is needed for the patient. And I can see also in our countries, and I talk about the Nordic countries now, we have representatives from Karolinska Comprehensive Cancer Center, and suddenly when that was an accreditation, 2 additional centers in Sweden, having a little bit more than 10 million inhabitants, and a 4th one is perhaps on the way. And what I can see that these organizations, they are starting to communicate with the center in Oslo, with the Denmark the centers, and with the Finland center. So I think creating the comprehensive cancer center, bring them together and involve them in the discussion how to organize the research at the national level. I think that is probably the way to do it. So good work for UCI to continue and accredit more centers in Europe. Thank you.